Hello, I am Aziz Hanifa, the Executive Editor of India Abroad, and welcome to the first episode of The Trailblazers, an interview series showcasing stories of Indian American immigrants from different fields of endeavor. Indian Americans, who number roughly 3.5 million in the United States, have made a mark in a number of areas such as information technology, healthcare, and hospitality, among others. Now, even in the political arena, the community is beginning to have its voice heard in Washington and state capitals across the country. In this series, we will hear stories of Indian Americans who have blazed the trails and broken the glass ceilings in these diverse fields. Our first guest is Raj Gupta, former chairman, president, and CEO of the erstwhile Philadelphia chemical giant Rohm and Haas, which was acquired by Dow Chemicals a few years ago. After having joined the specialty chemical company in an entry-level job, Raj rose through the ranks for more than a decade. From 1998 to 2009, he was the first foreign-born and person of color to lead this century-old company, till he retired after 40 years with the firm. He was then called back to help steer the acquisition of this Fortune 500 heavyweight, Dow Chemical, for $19 billion. During his tenure as chairman and CEO, the Rohm and Haas stock was the second best performer in the S&P 500. Raj, it's a pleasure to be with you in your lovely home in Philly, and thank you for having us over.
Aziz, what a pleasure to have you here in our home, and also an opportunity to really be the first of this series.
Thank you. I believe you came to the US as a graduate student after graduating from IIT Bombay and went to Cornell. Can you speak to those early years, the initial part of your American journey?
Well, first of all, coming to America was a dream for me. And it was formed in the early years by watching Hollywood movies, and then followed that by my stint at IIT, where we had a professor from Cornell who was absolutely impressed by the students coming out of IIT. And the final thing I would say was really the reputation of the great American institutions like MIT, Harvard, Cornell, Columbia. So I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to come to the United States and go to Cornell. And in fact, it wasn't just my first visit to America, it was my very first airplane flight as well.
You were pretty young when you came. Were you married at the time?
Well, I was 22, and of course, one of the conditions my parents put on me was that I had to get married before I left for the United States. So I deferred to their judgment to find a wonderful bride for me. And thank God we are still together after 50 years.
At Cornell, and after you began your avatar at Rohm and Haas, and the career that you had, did you ever imagine what life had in store for you?
Well, I came to the United States with an idea of doing PhD in operations research from Cornell and going back and teaching at IIT Bombay. That was my dream. And lo and behold, my wife Kamala joined me 6 months later. And I figured out operations research wasn't the field for me. I was more a pragmatic guy. And so I decided to pursue business career after my master's degree. And I was very fortunate, actually, in 1969 to have a job offer from IBM, Xerox, and Burroughs. And in addition, Scott Paper. And it's a funny story because what led me to Scott Paper was the fact that they sent a company airplane in 1969 to bring two of us to interview. And my uncle was a professor at Villanova in suburban Philadelphia, and we had no relatives in this country. So we thought, and Philadelphia was the warmest of the other locations. So combination of those three factors led me to join Scott Paper. 2.5 years I worked at Scott Paper. I had great mentors there, but my parents were still alive at that time, and their burning desire was to see me come back to India. And at that time, Scott Paper had no operations in India. I finished my master's in business at Drexel, and I was interviewed by Rohm and Haas Company for a job in finance. And that's really what brought me to Rohm and Haas in November of 1971. Yeah. Did I have any idea I was going to become CEO 28 years later? Absolutely not.
At Roman Haas, I believe you were one of the few, if not the only colored guy, and definitely the only Indian. And you were also in a field at the time quite different to that of those early Indian pioneers.
So I would say, majority of the Indians who migrated to United States during my time period were engineers, scientists, doctors, very accomplished individual performers. And there are very few of us were in the business world. And I think when I joined Scott Paper or Roman Haas in early days, there were obviously few scientists in the R&D, few engineers in manufacturing. But I was probably the very first, not probably, I was the very first Indian American in the corporate office working in finance and business management.
And can you talk to those early years, the struggles, how tough it was, both professionally and personally, in terms of the in-your-face confrontations you probably experienced? If you can talk to that experience in terms of how you tackle those challenges.
Well, I think, first of all, I did not have the sense that I was being overtly discriminated. And it didn't feel like I felt like I had barriers to overcome. But I did feel like an outsider. Frankly, I felt like an outsider most of my working life as an adult. But I think I found both at Scott Paper and more so at Roman Haas a pretty even playing field. And, the experiences we had or the barriers I felt were perhaps more self-imposed than imposed by the organizations. And I think I kind of ignored them. And I was very fortunate to really have some great mentors early on in my career who helped me navigate all the challenges that I faced professionally.
2 years ago, I remember interviewing you about your book, the book that you wrote, $8 and a Dream, My American Journey. What inspired you to write that book?
Well, it's an interesting story because the whole genesis of the book came at the request of my two daughters, who had young kids at that time. And they said, Dad, you have lived an interesting life. We have been part of it. But our children, who are very young, three grandsons, and they have no clue as to what it was like when you came and the life you lived. So what we'd like you to do is to document the family history. That was the genesis of the book. Then, of course, what happened was, as I started to write it with the help of my co-writer, Sid Havely, it became very apparent that it's hard to separate your personal life and your professional life and raising a family. Because, we were not just in the United States, we lived in Europe and France and England for 15 years, and when we also lived in Asia. So I think, at the end of the day, it became amalgam of both personal and professional journey.
And rewinding, I remember in your book, you speak about growing up in India, what your parents taught you, and your family, were they sort of middle class, upper middle class? Can you talk to the background and your growing up in India before you came to the US?
So the majority of my families really came from professional background. My mother's father was a civil engineer. My father was a civil engineer. And I would summarize them in, very simply, their rule was work hard, play by the rules, and be humble. And I think that served me well, particularly in the US culture. I would say the second thing I learned from them is respecting everyone, irrespective of their status in the society or their wealth or their age. I think the other thing I learned from my parents is what I call resilience. Never give up. And I think that itself served me very well throughout my both personal and professional career. And this is something I think we got from our mother, inquisitiveness and restlessness. My mother was a very restless person. And frankly, when I look back even today, when I see my siblings, all 6 of us are incredibly restless people who always want to do something and be active rather than passive.
That was something I was coming to. Would you say that in your career in the corporate world, you're rising to the highest levels in your company, in America's corporate world per se, that you can that rise can happen strictly on merit? Can you succeed without playing politics, without the hobnobbing, without the schmoozing? And there is also the thing about where you're coming from. You come from this culture of India and its traditions and etc. Is that possible?
Well, I think world has evolved and changed a lot since I came to United States 50 years ago. Frankly, the perception of Indians at that time was that they are good technical experts, they are individual performers rather than business leaders. Today, the world is completely different. So my journey was, in steps that, I obviously did reasonably well as an individual performer, got noticed by some of my bosses over time, and they believed in me over time more than I believed in myself. And I think over time, some of them became my mentors and teachers, and they were very candid in terms of giving me feedback about things that I should do better or behaviors that I should change. It felt pretty awful at times because of very direct feedback. But thank God for their intervention at the right time, that they gave me opportunities, they coached me, and paved the way for me. And I think had it not happened, frankly, I would not have realized half the potential or the opportunities that I had.
In all this while, becoming part of the mainstream, how do you reconcile, how do you maintain your sort of Indian identity in terms of your roots, in terms of your individuality?
I think authenticity, if that's the word I use, is so important. I think maintaining your identity, being who you are, is so important because you can't fake it. And I think what's interesting, at least based on my experience, is that once they get to know you, work with you, they respect you as an individual. They judge you as an individual rather than the stereotype. I think over time, there are certain traits as an Indian and as an American I have maintained is certainly, respect for the elders, respect for authority, be less confrontational in terms of my comments. The very interesting example I'll give you is, recently I was at an event and somebody asked me a very direct question, Raj, you don't make enemies. And it really made me think, and I said the only thing I can attribute it to is throughout my life, both personal and professional, I have tried not to be critical or demean an individual. We have talked about issues, we have our disagreements, we have our debate, but not to put the other person down to look good. That to me is a great example. In a sense of just treating people with respect rather than attacking them.
Right at the beginning, I asked you whether even in your wildest dreams you could have imagined what life had in store for you. And now as you reflect, it is a cliche, but do you believe that you've lived the American dream to the fullest in all its tangible manifestations?
Well, I think overall I would say, I would not change a lot. As I said, on reflection, there's certain things that I would have done differently, but that's learning experience. You learn more from your own mistakes and successes than you learn from just reading or listening to others. But I frankly have no regrets in terms of the path I chose, the decisions I made, how I interacted with people. And frankly, whatever I achieved was far and above and beyond what I thought was even possible.
You've been a trailblazer, but you've also got two daughters, Amita and Vanita, who've been trailblazers in their own right. And now you've got grandchildren. In terms of your legacy, what would you like your epitaph to be?
Well, I hope people will remember me as somebody who was forthright and honest, always kept the agenda of the organization ahead of myself. I'll just say, in terms of interpersonal skills, that I contributed to the success or the growth of the individuals I interacted with professionally and personally. And I would say I'm very proud of what our two daughters have achieved and what they continue to contribute in the field of medicine and human rights and civil rights. And I have great hope for our three little grandsons who are 7, 8, and 9. Rohan, Chetan, and Austin. I think if that's all I am remembered for, that's more than plenty. I actually acknowledge somebody very special in my life who's really made it all possible. And I think it's been my life partner, Kamla. We have been married just over 50 years. It was truly an arranged marriage. But when I think about the contribution that she has made on multiple fronts, in addition to being a supportive wife and helping with my career. But here is somebody who barely spoke English when she came. She lived in the same city, same house all her life, adult life, and comes here, learns the language, moves around Europe, adjusts to the cultures, faces the challenges of raising two pretty strong-willed daughters, and at the same time maintaining contact with the family. As I reflect back, and like all couples, we have our ups and downs, but frankly, again, I would not have survived or thrived without her, absolute support during this 50 years.
In fact, I was saving the best for the last to ask you about Kamla. But also in your book, you also talk about your trailblazing daughters, but at the same time, one is in an interracial marriage, the other is in a same-sex marriage. And these are issues that is very difficult to people like us who come from South Asia with the culture we've grown up, the heritage we've grown up, etc. Why were you so candid and so frank?
Again, great question and observation, Aziz. One of the things I've learned from people don't want to talk about the unpleasant experiences.
They're constantly in denial.
Yeah, in denial. And why bother? Nobody has interest in listening to what you went through. But part of writing this was a cathartic for me, of reflecting back about all the things that we went through professionally, personally, and I would say culturally, because we have one daughter who was married to an young Indian lawyer and divorced and married a Vietnamese American. They're very happy. They've given us two great grandsons, very successful individuals. And our older daughter, who informed us in her 20s, and we sort of suspected that she was gay, and eventually finding a very accomplished partner who's now professor at Hopkins as well, like our daughter is. To me, one of the things I've learned is not to judge people based on stereotypes. This goes back to what I talked earlier, whether it's race or gender or it's sexual preference or whatever. But, it takes its toll, all right? So I would say, while, I was in a corporate world, saw a lot of things, for Kamla, it was particularly tough as a mother. And I give her a lot of credit for the way she dealt with it honestly. And today, we get together, we travel around the world. All 9 of us were in India, and we have absolutely no hesitation or regret about how the life has shaped. It's been a great learning experience, and I do believe that tolerance and understanding is a great trait to have.
Do you have any regrets?
To be honest, Aziz, I have absolutely no regrets. If I were to live my life all over again, I would do exactly what I did. I was very fortunate.
And what would you like your legacy to be?
One of the things of the success you talked about is having resources that you can give back and help others. And that really has been probably more satisfying and rewarding in some ways than the professional success or involvement with the boards. And I think very early on, I decided that that's where I wanted my resources to go. And we created this foundation of Ujala with a view of basically focused on 2 things, education and healthcare. And I've been very fortunate to have very strong partnership with the Haas family, the founding family of Roman Haas. And over the last 8 years, we have contributed nearly $20 million to various causes. The biggest beneficiaries have been two of my alma maters at Drexel and Cornell, the work that Amita is doing in India, the work that Vanita has been doing in the United States with the ACLU, and now with the Leadership Conference, and also a lot of the cultural organizations as well, like Franklin Institute, Academy of Natural Sciences, Philadelphia Zoo, Philadelphia Museum of Art, Pratham, AIF. So, we have tried to keep it focused and something that gives me a great deal of pleasure. We are not bureaucratic. We don't ask big proposals from everybody. I believe that I fund organizations and people I believe in. So we have kept it very simple, and I think it has been extremely rewarding.
While wishing you all the very best to many more years of a productive life, and any final thoughts in terms of what message you may have for the younger generation?
Well, I try not to preach, but I think I'm also open to having a conversation because I think life is not a straight line. And I think learning, I believe all of us learn more from our adversities and bad experiences than we learn from our successes and opportunities that are presented to us.
What an absolute delight, Raj, and thank you very much. And once again, thank you for having us in your home and hosting us. And to our viewers, we'll be back with another guest very soon. Thank you.